This is Comic Geek Speak, episode 1713, Top 5 Reads When Stranded on a Deserted Island. I'm Shane Kelly.
I'm Adam Murdo.
I'm Chris Epperly.
And I'm Ian Levinstein.
Woo!
We made it, gentlemen. Woo!
It was a long and arduous road.
First of all, even though Ian has already earned the CGS Medal of Valor, we're going to add an extra ribbon to that because the only reason this episode is happening because he troubleshooted for the past 45 minutes to get us all on the air via Skype.
And then my favorite part is that after all that troubleshooting, it just magically worked.
Yeah. I'm going to have like 15 emails coming to change my password when it just accepted it on the 30th try.
Did you try turning it off and on again?
I did actually. I had to reboot the computer the one time.
Well, there you go.
But that was a different computer. So that one still didn't work.
Well, all that matters, Shaney Poo, is that you're with us. And, Ian, thanks so much for joining us. This is a remote recording. None of us are actually in the studio, hence some of the logistical challenges. But thanks to Ian, we surmounted them. And Murd, you'll be making the epic trek back to Pennsylvania next week. So we can we'll be having someone anchoring us in the studio going forward. So
I shall be the hearty helmsman from next week forth.
Outstanding, brother. Many thanks. And we wanted Ian to join us, not just because of his troubleshooting skills, because he's such a wonderful addition for any episode, especially top fives. So thanks for joining us, brother.
A pleasure, gentlemen. A pleasure.
And Shane, this is your topic. This is your idea, my friend. You want to lay out the ground rules a little bit about what you mean by it?
Well, it's anything that you. If you had like 30 seconds to grab, well, maybe a couple minutes, 30 seconds would be hard to grab all this. But if you had a little bit of time to grab something before you were stranded on a desert island, what would your top 5 comic book reads be? It can be an issue, although I don't know why you would do that. It can be a whole series of issues. It can be a whole series. It can be crossovers. It can be graphic novels, omnibuses. It doesn't matter. Whatever you can figure out how to get on a deserted desert island if you're trapped.
Outstanding topic. Let me tell you, Shane, I came home from school and I was like, I'm looking forward to this. And I went down to my library. Deliciously excruciating to move through this. My alternates list is absurd. I must have like 30 alternates
and
on my
I
list.
could go on that kind of a tirade too. I mean, I cheat. One of my picks is a total cheat because I can lump so much under it. I mean,
that's my favorite part about these top 5s, though, is cheating.
Oh my God, yeah.
And as we always say, this is our hill, this is our beans. So, Shane, you can do whatever the hell you want. So,
I would need a couple steamer trunks. I would need the steamer trunks from Tom Hanks's Joe versus the Volcano. That's what I would to carry all this crap.
Well, it's a wonderful topic, brother. Thank you. And but my friends, if I may just take a moment for a personal aside, I just want to thank all of you because this month is my 5th anniversary as a member of the CGS cast.
Hey.
And
wow.
I just want to thank you all and those who were part of the cast during absentia because, this, I got to say, being part of the show, it's really one of the joys of my life. And I mean, I don't mean to sound pathetic. I have a full life, but this is when having a bad day or, things are going tough in other areas of life, I could always count on this show and this fellowship and my brothers to, put some steam in my strides. So thank you all for the honor and the opportunity. It's just been a grand time these past 5 years and hopefully many years to come. So
5 years, wow.
Time flies, man. Time flies.
Yeah, it sure does.
It does indeed. So that was my little moment to wax rhapsodic. So let's talk about our selections here. damn, this is a great topic, Shane. I was so excited for this. I think we should start with Ian since he's the one who made this episode possible. So, Ian, why don't you? Well, like as we always, we'll each give our pick, and then we'll come back and then go into more detail on each. So, Ian, what's your number 5?
Well, because I always like being different, I'm going to go with a manga for my number 5. My number 5 is 20th Century Boys and the subsequent series 21st Century Boys, because that's all part of the same thing.
Okay.
All right, Shane, how about you?
My number 5 is all Crisis titles and their ensuing crossover issues.
That'll keep you busy for a while.
It gets worse. It gets worse.
Shane, you weren't kidding about cheating. Holy mackerel.
Oh, my God, yeah.
You'd have to leave one of your children behind to bring all this stuff on the island with you. My God.
So who do you think's carrying it? They're strong now.
There's not going to be any room on the island for you, Shane. It's just going to be issues.
No. I'm going to have comic beds, comic drawers, comic boxes, all the stuff that is the same thing, but it means a little bit different on a deserted island.
He's basically building his own artificial atoll out of reading material.
Yeah.
It's like how the Chinese are creating artificial reefs in the South China Sea. Shane's going to do the same thing, just with comic books, basically.
Right. That's right.
Murd, what's your number 5?
My number 5 is a particular hardcover Donald Duck treasury that I have left over from my childhood.
All right. I was counting on something like that from you, Murd. All right. My number 5 is the Claremont Cockrum Byrne X-Men run.
Excellent.
All right, Ian, fire away, brother.
So 20th Century Boys is easily one of my favorite mangas of all time. I have vague recollection of you guys maybe touching on it as a book of the month at one point, but I may be wrong on that. The main premise of 20th Century Boys is that when a group of friends were young, they got together and they formed a clubhouse like people do, and this was basically, I believe they grew up in the 90s, if memory serves. No, my mistake. 1969, even better. And they got together and they created this clubhouse, and they created a secret society essentially amongst their friends. And they wrote a manifesto of ways that they would be able to take over the world, as many kids may do in a playful fashion. That was the last they really thought of it until flash forward to the turn of the century, and suddenly these acts that they wrote about in their scripture start coming true, and they have to wonder which one of them is doing this. And one of them has essentially become a cult leader through this process. And more and more of the world is being recruited into this faction, into this cult, and the rest of the friends all gathered together to try and find out, exactly which one of them did this, and can they stop this individual from taking over the world. It's easily one of my favorite mangas. It's by the same guy who created the manga Monster, which was all about a doctor who saved the life of a child who then grows up to be a Hitler type character, and he decides it's his purpose in life to track down and kill this kid, former kid, because he's the one who saved his life in the first place. The writer is Naoki Urasawa, and easily one of my favorite manga writers of my lifetime. And this is one of those series that I can just see myself going back to over and over and over again and finding things that I didn't find the first time around. It concludes in 21st Century Boys. I believe altogether it's 22 volumes, but they're actually releasing it in a quote-unquote perfect edition now, which is basically omnibuy. Or omniboo or omnibuses or however you want to say it. Where they're it's basically 2 volumes per volume. So now they're going to be releasing them in an 11 volume edition altogether. But yeah, definitely one of those series that I could just see myself reading over and over again, especially if I'm trapped on a desert island with nothing better to do.
Now, Ian, was this also adapted into an anime?
It was not an anime. However, it was a series of live-action films. And I've never seen the films. I would like to at some point. I know that they made some changes, but these films were very, very popular when they were released in Japan. I believe they might have even been number one at the box office when they happened. But 20th Century Boys: Beginning of the End, 20th Century Boys 2: The Last Hope, and 20th Century Boys 3: Redemption are the three movies that were released. And you can probably find them easily enough online. I don't know if there were ever actually any official releases of the movies, but the manga is very easy to find. And like I said, they're releasing them in giant size editions now, many years after they were originally released.
And what year was the manga produced?
Manga was originally produced. Its original run was 1999 to 2006.
Okay.
So it began right before the 21st century. I guess hence the name, and then eventually concluded in 2006. And it has twists, it has turns, and as is the case with many manga, it has things that you could consider to be an ending, and then there's more. There's a woman, there's a girl involved at one point that becomes almost like their disciple. Who they try to protect, because it's this young girl that one of their leaders, Kenji, needs to protect at all costs, and a whole bunch of other people get involved as it goes along, and the art itself is very, very pretty. It's one of those series that they don't skimp on the backgrounds. They definitely create a world within this manga that I highly appreciate, and again, I could easily see myself going back to it over and over again.
All right, outstanding.
Wow.
I've heard of Monster, and I've heard that's a wonderful story. So you're further piquing my interest in that I really should get more into manga, because I've barely scratched the surface of manga in my life. So
yep.
And I read the first few volumes of Monster, and I liked it. I just didn't keep up with it.
I think
we actually did a Book of the Month episode about the first volume or two of Monster years and years ago.
That's what I was thinking of, Murd. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of. You guys did Monster, not 20th Century Boys, but I've certainly mentioned 20th Century Boys to a few of you before. I remember that, but when on manga suggestions, and I continue to suggest it to this day. It's good stuff.
All right, outstanding. All right, Shane. Things Crisis.
All things Crisis. So now some of this is because I have recently finally acquired, if you look in the Absolute Crisis on Infinite Earths, in the second volume, I believe it is, the little extra super special part of it, there's a list of all the crossover issues. And I think, if I'm right in what I counted, they number 52.
52!
I have recently acquired the last two that I didn't have, which I thought I had. So now I have all of the original Crisis on Infinite Earth crossover issues, but I've never read them. None of them. I've only ever read the 12 issues to the main series. So I would love to sit down and start with Crisis number 1, go through all of the storyline, the main 12 issues, all the ancillary crossover issues, and then filter through like 0 Hour, Infinite Crisis, Identity Crisis, Final Crisis, and now Heroes in Crisis, and everything surrounding it, to read it all as it came out in order from start to finish, just to see how it would read. And again, some of it I've never read. There are some crossover titles in all the other Crisis titles as well that I didn't read. I've read a lot of it, but not all of it. It's just something that I don't have quite the passion or memory for it that Adam or Peter certainly does, but I do love them. Every time there's something that comes out in DC and it's some crisis level event, I read it, and there's always something in it that I find interesting. And I can see myself. I mean, I do. I read the main series titles over and over again. I've just never been able to sit down and reread everything that's related to it as well. And I think that'd be a lot of fun. And if I'm stuck on a deserted island, that's something I'd want along.
Murd, you must be beaming with pride right now.
Well, pride and a bit of envy, because Shane stole my number 2.
Jeez. Well, I didn't want to do that.
Unlike Shane, I wouldn't have gotten greedy, though, and brought along all the crossovers. I would have just settled for not even the Absolute Edition. I would have just taken my trusty old Crisis hardcover slipcase from like the early 2000s or whenever that was put out. But yeah, I mean, it's a great story. It's one of the greatest stories told in the medium or in the genre of superhero comics. And, I devoted a year or two of my life to thinking primarily about that, to write a thesis about it. And I didn't get tired of it then, so I probably wouldn't get tired of it on a desert island. And if you want to hear me ramble on more about Crisis, we've got a whole spin-off podcast about it, as Shane sort of alluded to, Peter and I, on a roughly annual basis, talk about our love for Crisis. And I guess a little time on a desert island with that would help me prepare for the next episode. So, yep, Shane and I would be in the same boat, figuratively and perhaps literally, as far as taking Crisis to the island with us.
Boy, that would be great if it was the same boat. We would only have to take one of them, free up for something else.
Shane stole your number 2, and that's the exact exclamation that you screamed in your head when he said it.
All right, Murd, Donald Duck.
Oh, yes, that's right. This is a particular publication. I think I must have mentioned it on the show once or twice before, possibly during Chris's top 5 childhood favorite reads that we did a while ago. This is something my dad picked up for me at a yard sale when I was a young lad. It was published sometime in the mid to late 70s, I'm pretty sure. It's enormous. The thing's like 20 inches by 16 inches, something like that. Yeah, it's got a white hardcover. It is Disney's Donald Duck in huge letters, Treasury, and an image of Donald himself leaping. I forget if I think he's chasing a magic hourglass in the lower right-hand corner of the cover. And it contains a bunch of classic, mostly Carl Barks duck stories. It's got Only a Poor Old Man, A Christmas for Shacktown, both of which are Christmas stories. It's got the Golden City of El Dorado. It's got Lost in the Andes. Just duck classics all. And I read this mammoth compendium of duck comics many times when I was a child. And, I did wrestle a little bit with this top 5 topic, how to address my picks here in such a way that it doesn't just turn into what are my top 5 favorite comics, which is, well-trodden ground for all of us here on CGS. So some things I took into account were having a high rereadability factor, being light in tone, nothing too heavy or angst-ridden because, you're stuck on a desert island. You want to keep your morale up. And also maybe something that's appropriate to the specific scenario. What if you're stuck on in a tropical or semi-tropical or even desertous chunk of rock in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? What suits do you want something that's got a tropical setting to read, or are you going to want something that's just the exact opposite of that? Well, the Duck comics are a kind of a classic blend of high adventure and lighthearted humor, and the Donald, Uncle Scrooge, and the nephews go all over the world in these stories. There's some frigid Arctic settings, there's some tropical settings, and throughout it's just great high-spirited adventure and humor, and it's the kind of thing that would help to keep my spirits up if I were stuck on a desert island. And since, as I said, I read it many times over when I was a kid, I know it lends itself to repeated readings, which may be necessary if I'm stuck on this island for any real length of time. And what was the final point? Oh, yeah, it's also very large and heavy, so I can use it to bludgeon any local live wildlife to death. And I can count on it not blowing away if a tropical storm blows up. So there's a practical dimension there, too. So there's my Donald Duck treasury.
What I loved about that selection, not only just the tie to childhood nostalgia, but Murd figured out different ways he could use the book as a survival tool while he's on the island.
Yeah, right?
I'll build the shelter, Murd catches the food.
Yes, you'll build the shelter out of your comics, and I'll go out and break a capybara's neck or something.
Death by Donald.
Now, I will say that one of my alternates was Carl Barks's Uncle Scrooge run in All Things DuckTales.
Nice.
Nice.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so my number 5. So when I was thinking about this list, I realized that I had to select books that I return to again and again that I'm rereading throughout my life as a comic book fan and reader. And I also realized that like some of my alternates from a sort of a critical level or like a sophistication level, or in some ways, in quotes, better than some of the books I picked for my top 5. But the top 5 are the books that I have such a deep connection to for various reasons. So starting with number 5, which is the Chris Claremont, Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, Terry Austin run on X-Men. So that starts in the mid-1970s and goes into about 1980, I think, somewhere in there. This is a period for these characters where I, like so many, I'm sure many of our listeners and just fans in general, I so deeply fell in love with the X-Men, the concepts behind them, like, you know, their struggle to achieve equality, the various subplots, the wonderful soap operatic elements, Claremont's wonderful ear for distinctive character voices in terms of their dialogue and their interplay, the stunning costume designs of Dave Cockrum, especially like the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, John Byrne's art, and which continues to blow me away to this day. Just all the magnificent villains that were either reintroduced or introduced, all the different places the X-Men were taken to, the Savage Land, Japan, you name it. It just, when I think of like high adventure, when I think of great soap opera, all the elements that just made Marvel Comics so innovative and fun, really in their heyday. This is an era I always come back to when it comes to these particular characters, and they're so evocative of just, you know, the mid to late 70s, the early 80s, the clothes, just the situations they're in, some of the pop culture references, but also just how Claremont and the artists, they give such distinct voices to these characters. They make you care about them, and they so develop their relationships. I mean, Kitty Pryde is introduced in this era, and she remains, to me, is one of the most compelling of all of the X-Men, because you see her grow from being basically barely a teen into an adult. I mean, I'm not really reading X-Men now, but I know she became one of the team leaders in recent years. So this is a superhero comic book that I will always cherish, and I have the omnibuses that collect this whole run, and they'd be heavy. But I remember I was flying home once from a family trip to Italy, and I brought the first Claremont Cockrum Byrne omnibus with me on the plane, despite its weight, because I knew I'd have all this time to read it. And despite the turbulence, I still don't regret that. So that's my number 5.
Well, one of my alternates is actually the Dark Phoenix saga. So that's
nice.
That's very much in the same vein right there.
Amen. Go ahead, Shane. Were you going to say something, brother?
One of my alternates is X-Men, but it's more from the time period I started reading them, which was really the release of just the X-Men title with Jim Lee's first issue.
1991, yeah.
And everything around there going forward. I haven't read much going backward. Some things, but not a lot.
I recommend it, my friend. All right, let's go to our number 4s, and we'll start with Shane.
All right, my number 4 is the complete collection, the volumes of Bloom County.
Wow.
Ooh, Berkeley Breathe It.
Yep.
Good choice.
All right, Merge, your number 4?
My number 4 from the mid-'80s, DC's The Oz Wonderland War.
Ooh, nice.
Fantastic. My number 4 is Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issues 68 through 131. Ian?
My number 4 is Avengers Forever.
Oh, that's a good one.
Terrific.
Damn! I love this concept. All right, Shane, fire away.
All right, so growing up back in the 80s, I read newspaper comic strips, but I didn't pay much attention to Bloom County until I met a friend, Tom and Damon. They were brothers, about half mile back the road that I lived on. And their mother, as well as them, introduced me to some of the collected volumes they had out back then. Not many, just 1 or 2. But I started reading them, and they had Star Trek references, very political references, which at that time I didn't really get. They went right over my head. Funny things, Opus the Penguin, Bill the Cat, and I was entertained. So from that point on, I not only kept up with the daily strips in the newspapers and the Sunday strips, but I started buying the little floppy collections that they would have every so often. And then a few years ago, I believe it was IDW, started putting out complete collections in order of Bloom County. And it went right through Bloom County and Opus, and gosh, I can't remember what the other one was called, the next one. Outland. And then Bloom County is now back, although they don't have many collections of that out. But I was thrilled. So I snatched all of them up as they came out. And it's a pride in my collection of something that is artistic and comic related, but not comic book, not DC, not Marvel, not even independent. It is newspaper strips. And it's something that series I've loved since I was a kid. And I was thrilled when it came back in any iteration that it found ground to grow on. So, yeah, Bloom County was almost a no-brainer for me.
I remember in the 80s, that was the strip you read.
Oh,
So,
and now to reread it and get an understanding of all the more adult themes that ran through that I did not get back then when I was 12, 13, whatever. Now, it's just funnier.
and Shane, how is the new strip?
I love it. It's very timely for coming back, and he even pokes fun at himself on especially the early days of it coming back, pokes fun at himself about what he's writing and joking about being very similar to what he wrote and joked about back then, and it just felt right for him to come back and start presenting this satirical look at the world again.
Yeah, I was about to say, he took a lot of pot shots at Donald Trump back in the 80s that are suddenly pretty topical again right now.
Yeah, he sure did.
Outstanding. All right, Murd, go ahead with your number 4.
All right. I have got the Oz Wonderland War miniseries that DC put out in the 80s, written by the Beatus Bridwell, E. Nelson Bridwell, co-written by Joey Cavalieri, and illustrated by an underrated cartoonist named Carol Leigh. This was originally supposed to be the final 6-issue arc of Captain Carrot and his amazing zoo crew, and it does feature those characters, in addition to as many different characters from L. Frank Baum's Oz books and Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, as could be crammed into the pages allotted. But instead of coming out as the last 6 issues of Captain Carrot, it was instead published as 3 double-sized limited series issues. And this is it's a great deal of fun if you're a fan of either Captain Carrot or of either of those classic children's fantasy lands I just mentioned, which I sure as heck was as a child. I first read about this mini-series in an issue of the Baum Bugle, which was the official in-house newsletter of the International Wizard of Oz Club, of which I was a member as a little shaver. And I'd wanted to read it for years, and then finally, when I became a comic book fan, I wanted to track it down, and it took me the longest time to find issues of this thing. So it's kind of like it is a treasure. It's the kind of thing that I would force into a life jacket if the boat I was on was going down and I saw that desert island on the horizon. It's also a comic that I have been meaning to dig out and reread for years now, and the time never seems quite right. But being trapped on a desert island for days or weeks or months, I can think of no better opportunity. Because it's similar to the Donald Duck thing that was my number 5. It's lighthearted adventure, and it's got some excellent cartooning by Carol Leigh, who captured the appearance of these characters as drawn by W.W. Denslow, John R. Neal, and/or Sir John Tenniel very well, plus keeping abreast of Scott Shaw's designs for the Zoo Crew as well. So it's just a lot of fun, and if you enjoy silly superheroes and also Baum and Lewis Carroll, it's something you should probably have in your collection. And it's something that I would enjoy just kind of kicking back under a palm tree and reading for a time on it.
I just love how they brought all these different characters from these different universes into one story. That sounds immensely fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they even threw in the Inferior 5 for a cameo appearance.
Wow.
Well, didn't Bridwell invent the Inferior 5?
He did, yes.
Yeah.
he certainly did.
Yeah.
They also threw in kind of a sly cameo of doppelgangers of the Fantastic Four and the Hulk.
Huh. Well, I know Bridwell is one of your great heroes in comics, Murd, so that's got to be a fun read.
Oh, that he is. And he loved the Oz books as much as I do, so it really comes through in this miniseries.
Didn't Marvel and DC, prior to this, do a collaborative treasure dish where they retold the original story of The Wizard of Oz? Am I correct in saying that?
You are absolutely correct. In fact, it's the first time Marvel and DC officially collaborated on anything.
Wow.
It was one of the.
I didn't know
as
that.
you said, it was a giant treasure edition.
Wow.
This sounds like a confluence of characters of crisis proportions almost.
Yeah, that could be added to my pick.
That's where I was going with that.
Ian, that just gave me a real charge. Damn, I'm glad you're with us right now. Outstanding.
Also in my brain, I can't help but think women and children first, Oz second.
Terrific. All right, my number 4. Okay, so longtime listeners will know that I love Spider-Man. Besides the Black Panther, he's my favorite superhero character in comics. I've loved him since I was a child. I mean, in my store, there was a photograph. I still have it in my house around here somewhere of me as a little kid in a homemade Spider-Man costume my grandmother made. And I'm holding up my mask as I reveal my secret identity. So it's just a character I've always loved, film, animated, and, of course, the comics. And so I had to include him somewhere on this list. And I went back to what is really my favorite run in the character's history. And I have to catch up. I'm not reading much Spider-Man right now. I have the last couple issues of like the end of the last volume, the new volume. I haven't read them yet, but nothing changes the fact that at the core of what makes Spider-Man great, is the reason why I love this character. The pathos, the humor, the often ridiculous situations he finds somewhere he has to try to balance his regular life with being this superheroic character. The tremendous supporting cast, besides Batman, probably the greatest rogues gallery in comics. And this era of Spider-Man for me is what makes the character. Now, granted, this is past the Ditko era, and I don't want to poo-poo that because that's the foundation of everything. But for me, this is the late '60s into the 1970s. It's about like 1969 to about 1973, and Stan Lee is writing from issue 68 through 100. Then he takes a short break and he comes back for a few more issues in the early 100s. Murder always likes to talk about the last issue Lee did. I think he introduced the Gibbon. One of the lesser but sympathetic villains in Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. But for me, Lee really, I think as a writer, this is Lee at the peak of his powers in that he's so got down the voice of Peter Parker and not the voice of his supporting cast, which I think is one of the great supporting casts in comics, and just the soap operatic elements, which are so wonderful. There's always fun topical reference to what's going on in the country and the pop culture and the politics of that time, the late 60s and early 70s. This is also a period where you see Lee really going to town with long, lengthy stories that encompass many issues, the classic clay tablet stories, which run through like actually starting with issue 68 into like issue 77 or so. Great, beautiful John Romita Sr. art, John Buscema art, Jim Mooney art, classic stories with the Kingpin, Electro, the Vulture, the Chameleon, the Lizard. Great stuff with Gwen Stacy, Harry, Mary Jane, Flash goes off to Vietnam, for example. And then when you get into the early 70s, and there's a period of and again, it's part because it's also the year I was born, 1973, but issue 121, issue 131, which is Jerry Conway writing with Gil Kane, Romita Sr., and then Ross Andrew penciling, for me is one of the greatest periods ever for this character. You start with the death of Gwen Stacy, the, quote, death of the Green Goblin. You have the introduction of the Mark of the Man-Wolf. We've talked many times about the classic Power Records, where they adapt. That was one of my earliest introductions to Spider-Man comics. And, of course, the wonderful voice acting on that, Peter Parker with his strange, remote New York accent. The introduction of the Punisher in that era. And, of course, the Spider-Mobile in issue 130. And culminating with Aunt May somehow inheriting a nuclear breeder reactor in Canada. And then Doc Ock marries her to try to get his hands on that nuclear reactor to further his plans of world domination. The artwork, that sounds silly, but everything that makes Spider-Man great, just the humor, the pathos, the intricate subplots, that often call back to many issues before, the relationships they develop between him, Gwen, Mary Jane, Harry, the the Green Goblin, of course, the classic, the death of Gwen. It's everything that makes Spider-Man great. The reasons why, the better movies are great, the cartoons. For me, it's all in this particular era of the character, and they've got it all collected in omnibuses now and Marvel Masterworks. But for me, this is the essence of Spider-Man. That's my number 4.
I can't help but see in my brain Aunt May inheriting that nuclear facility and then turning it into a wheat cake factory.
Excellent callback, Ian. Excellent callback. Alas, I'm going to spoil it because it's 45 years ago. The reactor does explode at the end, so and which then converts Hammerhead later into a radioactive ghost. But joking aside, Jerry Conway is one of my all-time favorite writers, and he's writing these stories. He's like 19 or 20 years old when he's writing these stories. But the death of Gwen is a watershed moment where comic books change.
Absolutely.
Where he takes the Marvel universe and then the comic book storytelling form to another level, because the hero does not save the girl. And she doesn't, clones aside, she doesn't come back. And he really explores, Harry's having acid flashbacks and he's suffering because of his incredibly warped relationship with his father. And also he really explores the madness and the menace of Norman Osborn in a way we really hadn't seen before up to that point. So it's so much of what makes Spider-Man great. It's all right there in those stories.
100% agree.
Excellent.
All right. And Ian, you're number 4.
All right. So when I was thinking about these picks, I thought to myself, how can I get as many characters as possible into a book? And that's Avengers Forever. And it's so good. It's easily 12 of the best issues that I've ever read in my life, and
without question,
and one that you can just continue to go back to and find new and interesting things. Another thing that factors into it here, like so many background characters that you may not have recognized the first time around, like so many continuity references and fixes thrown in there. The fact that Kurt Busiek had the balls to try and straighten out Vision's origin after it had become so convoluted.
Yeah, it's almost as bad as Hawkman.
I was just going to say that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, come on. Like, did Ultron create him? What is he the reincarnated body of the original Human Torch? Is he both combined into one? Is he actually Sam from New Jersey? I don't know. Like, so many different things have happened to this character over the years, and Kurt Busiek did his best to try and right that ship, and God bless him for it. And so many interesting characters are in this. It's the first real appearance we get of Gina Svell as Captain Marvel, which one of my favorite characters of all time, begins right there. Peter David's run occurred immediately after this, and fleshed out the character even further. Yep. The actual cast of this is interesting because you had the Giant Man and Wasp of then present day comics, which were being written by Kurt Busiek in the Avengers book. You had a disillusioned Captain America after he finds out that that the president is the head of the secret society. You have Goliath, post Goliath Hawkeye, which I didn't even know existed until I read this comic, because my Avengers lore was few and far between before reading this, and I'm like, wait, what? He was Goliath for a while, and then I had to look that up, and like, all right, go figure. There's and then there's Yellow Jacket, which is another version of Hank Pym. Only at the time he didn't actually know he was Hank Pym, which made it even more fascinating. It's basically during his psychotic break, that's this version of Yellow Jacket on there.
Yep.
And Songbird, a future Avenger.
Great character.
Fantastic character, and one that I really wish they'd actually stuck the landing on the legacy for. Because I feel like Songbird has not had nearly as much play in the Marvel universe post Avengers Forever as I would have liked to have seen her have. But
yeah.
But it's it's an era spanning comic. We have we have the Avengers from the 50s show up, with 3D Man and all those guys. We've got a group of Avengers in the future with Black Panther involved, and we've got the Martians showing up. We've got so many different story threads, and so beautifully crafted by Carlos Pacheco on art. Easily some of the best stuff he's done in his career, and the detail he manages to fit into there.
Oh, it's breathtaking.
It's outstanding. It's absolutely outstanding, and I could see myself flipping through this book over and over and over again if I was stuck with nowhere else to go, just being like, oh yeah, I didn't notice that before. Okay, and then just make a little checklist out of it. Like, all right, that's another one to add to the fire there. So if you want the pinnacle Avengers book with as many Avengers you can possibly fit into a title, that's what you're going to find with Avengers Forever.
And Mert and I have spoken many times on the air about Kurt Busiek, to us, and I'm sure Mert will concur, is one of the greatest writers in comics.
No question.
And his love and reverence for the history that he's dealing with comes through in everything he does, whether it's the Marvel stuff or Astro City, where he's creating his own history, essentially. And, I mean, Avengers Forever that's one of his masterpieces.
Yeah.
And actually, we did, years back with Jamie D, I think we did a 2-part book of the month on Avengers Forever. So listeners definitely check that out. Yeah, Ian, great selection.
Yep.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, store number 3 is what's your pick?
All right. Well, this will piggyback nicely off of Ian's number 4, actually, because I chose it for much the same reasons as he chose Avengers Forever. JLA Avengers.
Oh,
nice.
Outstanding. All right, my number 3 is, and this is a mild cheat, but I know Shane would especially appreciate this. Let's call it the Frank Miller Batman opus. It's
okay.
Batman Year One and Batman: The Dark Knight Returns.
All right,
next is Ian. Yep, go ahead, sir.
My number 3 would be JLA volumes 1 through 6. Morrison and Wade.
Oh wow,
nice.
Shane?
Mine is Strangers in Paradise.
Oh, one of my alternates. Shane, magnificent.
Ooh.
All right, Mert, fire away.
All right. Well, yeah. Actually, Ian's kind of put me to shame here because Avengers Forever is actually, for the criteria I'm about to cite here for JLA Avengers as a choice, Avengers Forever is actually better in almost every respect. But, just for the ship, I asked myself about the same thing Ian asked himself about Avengers Forever. How can you cram as many characters and as much cool story content as possible into a single package? And just also the thinking behind Crisis, come to think of it. But what I came up with, though, mainly because I went back and sort of almost ceremonially reread it just a little bit ago, was JLA Avengers, a crossover written by the aforementioned Mr. Kurt Busiek with art by the legendary George Perez. And, because I'd read through just about all of 2003 when that miniseries was first published, and it occurred to me that I hadn't revisited it since Peter and I did those series of footnotes episodes for CGS several years ago, one of which was just over an hour of the two of us talking about the cover. Number 3. So if we could get that much mileage out of just the cover, I figured I could probably get a lot of mileage out of the thing on a desert island. So because, between Busiek's love of the commingled history of these two storied comics universes and just trying to match them up in imaginative ways, and Perez's semi-masochistic affinity for putting as many different characters into a single page or panel as he possibly can, there's a lot of grist for the mill there. I could just see myself hunched over on that little desert island, squinting in the blinding equatorial sunshine, saying to myself, there's Blue Jay. There's Plant Man hiding behind that rock. Hours and hours of desert island fun. So, but again, I must tip my cap to Ian because Avengers Forever is actually a much better choice for that purpose. But JLA Avengers is what I have written down, and I don't really regret it, so I'll stick with it.
So what's wonderfully grim about what Mert just described is that he's basically envisioning himself dehydrating and dying on the deserted island, but he's hallucinating and seeing these characters.
Wow, Savage Dragon is in here.
and
even in death, majestic geek activity. Wow.
And JLA Avengers also had one of my more favorite rewritings of the universe involved in it. It wasn't quite amalgam level, but having the JLA and the Avengers inhabiting sort of the same, Earth 1 and Earth 2-esque space was one of my favorite parts of that.
Crossovers with the luau's and barbecues and things.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
All right. So my number 3, I had to have Miller Batman on this list because there's a handful of comic book stories in my reading life that, whether I've read them when I was 12 or I'm reading them now at the age of 45, they still bring out intense emotion in me that in terms of chills, tears, or just a sense that I'm reading something that's larger than just a comic book per se. And for me, there are certain characters in comic books who have transcended the form, become part of sort of the fabric of American popular culture. And Batman is certainly one of those. I think many people would agree. I think he was voted like the comic book character of the century, if I remember correctly. But when I think of these stories, the word I think of is mythic, because what Miller does in both these stories, one at the beginning of Batman's career, and then when he imagines apparently the end of his career as a man, an older man. There's just so many moments in these stories where I'm overcome with the power, the evocative power of the mythic aspects of the character. Whether it's him, he's bleeding to death, and he's hesitating whether or not to reach the bell to summon Alfred to heal him, and he's talking to his father, and the bat comes right through the window. The interactions with Commissioner Gordon in year one, and just the sense that, while Batman is this larger than life persona, Bruce Wayne is struggling with how he's going to fit into this world he's trying to create for himself. And just the moments where you sense just the majestic, just sort of darkness and awe-inspiring presence of the Batman. When he summons all those bats and then they come and they swarm around him and he escapes from the police, and it still takes my breath away, because Miller's tapping into something so primal there that just elevates Batman as a transcendent character in comics. Then, of course, The Dark Knight Returns, which we've all read, and most of our listeners, I'm sure, have read, is another story. And we talked about this in another episode not too long ago, so I won't go into too much detail again, but where there's just so many moments where I'm just overcome with the power of the images. And I remember we talked about, and I think, Ian, you were on this episode, we talked about the moment where Superman is rejuvenated by the sun after he stopped the Soviet missile. Mm-hmm. And you get a sense of just the majestic, awesome presence of the Superman, and his connection to the earth, and when Batman first reappears, and he's taking on criminals, and just the hushed awe of everyone around him as he resurfaces, and then his relationship with the new Robin, and how he's he's so envious of her youth, and it's moments where Batman is established as he is just a larger than life mythic presence. And very few comics in the day-to-day, month-to-month of the issues, we don't always get that in these stories, but in these two arcs, these two moments, I mean, as a reader, I really appreciate the myth of the Batman, and it's these stories the reason why so much of the Christian Bale movies were so spot on, because they clearly went right to this source material, and they captured that mythic quality that some of the other versions of Batman and multimedia have not really done. So that's my number 3.
Excellent.
The Batman Year One movie. Have you happened to see that? I
loved it, with Bryan Cranston as Gordon.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful interpretation.
Yeah,
excellent. One of the best animated adaptations I think they've done.
Absolutely.
Loved it.
Yep.
A little side note. I just in the last couple months read for the first time The Master Race. That was actually a really good read.
Really? Huh. Okay.
Yep. I liked it better than the second Dark Knight Returns series.
Well, yeah.
All right, that's good to know.
So Shane, this is the third Dark Knight volume.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't actually read that yet. So you enjoyed it?
I did enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'll get to it eventually.
And that
All
one
right,
that one
go
was
ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah no I'm sorry that one was a co-writing gig, right, between Azzarello
Yeah.
and Miller?
Azzarello, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
All right, Ian, you're number 3.
Okay, so my number 3, I had to throw Morrison in here somewhere, and I waffled between one choice or another. The other one's going to wind up on my alternates, but just the way that Shane has a major affinity for the blah ha 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 era of Justice League. This was my JLA. It was right when I started reading DC Comics. I remember picking up JLA number 1 from the stands. I believe it was at a comic book shop that used to exist like right down the block from where I currently live. It unfortunately closed before I lived here. But if Bullpen Comics still existed on Coney Island Avenue and Avenue X, I would probably be there weekly. But I remember flipping through the pages and being like, I'm sold. And I had been looking for something that had a team aspect to it. I'd read a couple of things with the JLA in it before, but this felt new to me because I'd never really read one that had the quote unquote core members of the DC universe in it. And that's what Morrison brought back, the aspect of, we're going to have a Justice League with the heavy hitters in it. We're going to have, Superman, Flash, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, Wonder Woman, Batman, and Aquaman as our core. And then from there, introduce other characters. I highly appreciated him bringing in Connor Hawke, Green Arrow. And easily by far one of my favorite issues, which I believe I've mentioned before on the show in one way or the other, I think possibly in the Legacy Heroes top 5, where Connor Hawke was trapped in the Justice League Watchtower. And he had
I remember that one. Yep.
And he had to fight his way out with the use of his dad's trick arrows. Was
How about just one pointed arrow, Dad?
was just so much fun. And even though like he was saddled with Electric Blue Superman halfway through the run, he still managed to make it interesting. And that's what I actually appreciated the most about JLA, is that even as the characters changed, they were still in there one way or the other. And later on, Barda becomes a member of the cast. Plastic Man is in there, and a few others that if memory serves, culminating in one giant battle in the last issues of
World War III, right?
Yes, World War III. Yep. Which was so much fun. And plus, I mean, as part of this, you have Tower of Babel. As
it's a fantastic story.
Superb.
Superman, retreat.
I mean, absolutely every single thing that Batman tried to do to distance himself from the Justice League, to try to think like, if they go bad, what am I going to do to save myself and the rest of the world, blows up in his face. And it's all because of his greatest, one of his greatest villains, Ra's al Ghul. It's such a fantastic story arc. Even earlier on as well, when Lex Luthor and I believe it was the Injustice League,
the Rock of Ages.
Yep.
When they forced them to live out their greatest, sort of like their greatest what ifs. And I remember, Batman and Catwoman had a family together, and we were seeing the next generation of the Bat family in there, and that was really cool. And it was basically almost like a take on for the man who has everything. Which was very, very fun. And Howard Porter's art is superb. I know he had to. I mean, later on in his career, he had to entirely reteach himself to draw because he had he had a hand injury.
Wow! I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, so actually, the Justice League 3000 run that you like so much, Shane, that's after he retaught himself to draw. He had to draw with his other hand.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's major talent right there, to say
That
the least.
sure is.
Yep. And then once Morrison's run is completed, you have Volume 5. And I meant to say 1 through 5 because Volume 6 is when Joe Kelly takes over, and it's okay, but it's not nowhere near the quality of the rest of this. Volume 5 with Mark Waid and Brian Hitch was
it's tremendous.
Such a superb follow up to Morrison's run. Didn't last very long, just issues 47 to 60, and the whole splitting of their identities into two, and learning just how important their identities are to their alter egos, and how one cannot live without the other was just such a very intelligent way of looking at the JLA and the characters as a whole. And I just, it makes me happy reading this book. And I if I'm stuck with nothing else to read when it comes to DC, this'll make me more than happy.
Well, Ian, I want to thank you because I love those stories too. I read most of them as they were coming out, and I hadn't thought about them in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And you just brought back for me how masterfully executed those stories were, both Morrison and Waid and the artists working with them.
Yeah.
But also just they had an epic quality to them. I remember the issues where they're dealing with Darkseid, for example.
Oh, yeah.
And the World War III story, there's a great moment where Orion and Kyle Rayner are like being overwhelmed by like all these attacks, and Orion shouting, "The armies of men, as foretold in prophecy!" And it's so Morrison, because it's just this epic, grandiose, wacky. He just nailed. What was great about that, he took his sensibility, but he never forgot the core of what makes the Justice League great, and he just melded them together so perfectly. And you know what? I actually had, and this is painful to say this now, I had a splash page by Howard Porter when you could still afford original art. This is like in the late 90s, early 2000s. Mm-hmm. It was a splash page of the Injustice Gang. All of them. Destroyed in the flood that took my
So. I have, from the Rock of Ages, I have one page. It is when you see all the Injustice League shadowed as they're sitting around the table, and you're still not sure who everyone is. And the last panel is Joker, I think, throwing off the helmet because the holograms, the hard light holograms that they sent down to attack the League were defeated. And now they're figuring out what to do next.
Shane, great page. Wow.
Oh, nice. And it was cheap because you can't clearly see anybody. Everybody is shadowed out. But
yeah.
Once you read the story, you know who it is. It was only like $35 or $40 when I bought it.
Those are the days.
Nice.
Oh.
and let me reiterate, since you did bring him up, Chris. It had my Green Lantern and it had my Flash in it. All right, Wally West and Kyle Rayner. Fight me, they're still the best.
They're great characters.
Yep.
All right, Shane, number 3.
All right, Strangers in Paradise. So this story is just absolutely epic beyond belief. And I know Jamie is looking down smiling because it is all his doing. There is not a chance in hell I would have picked up this book had he not pushed and prodded to do it. I always thought the artwork looked nice. I just had no interest at all. But boy, oh boy, was I never so happy to be proved wrong to pick up something and read it as when we finally did that and continued to go through with Terry Moore, all the volumes, some of the best comics I have ever read, and to be able to discuss everything that we thought and felt about it with the creator. There's just no words that can describe it. It was just an absolutely fantastic experience.
Shane, I mean, that's one of my alternates. And this is what I was saying before about there are alternates that I picked that I think are really superior examples of what the comic book medium can achieve. Maybe they just don't have as much as the nostalgic attachment for me. Strangers in Paradise, for me, is one of the greatest comic book series ever created and probably ever will be created. And you summed it up there beautifully, but it's a master class in the medium.
Above and beyond this.
Yeah.
That is if I have friends or something that are interested in reading something, but they have no interest in superhero comics, I've given the first volume of that to various people and said, "Here, try this. You will like this."
I've done the same thing because it's a book you can recommend to anybody who likes to read. And has an interest in reading and in reading fiction. You can give them this book, even if they don't like comics or look down their nose at comics, never read comics. They're going to be drawn in because Moore is a creator who can any kind of plot device you can imagine, any kind of genre, he can master it, and often within one story. So I was saying, Strangers in Paradise, you got the intrigue, the espionage, the pathos, the humor. He's a wonderful comedic artistic storyteller. You've got the romance element. It's without question one of the greatest comic book series ever conceived.
Well, I mentioned this on the previews episode that I was a part of recently when I was talking about my New York Comic Con wrap up, but I just got to watch Terry Moore draw an entire page. And it was absolutely a joy. I mean, it was him, Jamal Igle, and Jerry Ordway at a drawing panel, all drawing off of the same script. And getting to see the results, and Jamal's page was pretty much was pretty much done, but it was a breakdown, and Jerry Ordway's was pretty much done, and it was a breakdown. Terry Moore, in the same amount of time, drew an entire detailed page, fully drawn.
His artwork just blows me away. The facial features, the detail. It's just gorgeous to look at in any respect, no matter if it's just a simple basic sketch or it's a full blown page. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, Shane, you made a great point there in that his command of body language and facial expression, which I'm not an artist, but I can imagine it must be so difficult to capture on the page. And his work, it just looks effortless. You can look at one of his pages, you know exactly what every character is thinking, what they're feeling. What's going on inside their head, whatever their struggle is, or the joke or whatever. I mean, not a term to be used lightly, especially in our culture today. But for me, he is a genius. He is one of the living masters of the comic book medium. Yeah. So it's a master class.
Like you said, his command of anatomy. The way he draws people and they look realistic. It's not that everyone is super muscular, and it's not that everyone is built. And I enjoy that in my superhero books, but the way he draws everybody, distinct individuality exists, and they're completely realistic.
Shane, outstanding pick. All right, our number 2s. I'll start. This is not going to be a surprise to anybody. My number 2 is Christopher Priest's run on the Black Panther.
Nice. The only surprise is that it's not number 1.
Yeah, well, you'll understand why not in a moment, my friends.
You shock and amaze me when you say the words Christopher Priest, Chris.
Ian, go ahead. You're number 2.
All right, my number 2. And this is tough because I'm getting down to like which ones am I putting on my list and which ones am I putting on my alternates. I think, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna do it. My number 2 is Vision, the complete series.
Oh, wow. All right, this is the biggest cheat in the entire universe. This is my Justice League category. This encompasses Justice League, JSA, All-Star Squadron, Infinity Inc. Because a lot of the
DC Comics, Shane.
Yeah, all of DC Comics. No, just all of these team books that all these heroes either are related, they intertwine, they show up in each other's books. It's partially because I've never read all of All-Star Squadron or Infinity Inc., or for that matter, even the first 150 issues of Justice League of America. And it's partially for my affinity for all of these teams books and the lineage that they put through all of them.
Makes sense to me. All right, Merge, you're number 2.
Well, it would have been Crisis, but since that's already been covered, I'm going to patch in their Starlin's early 90s Infinity trilogy. Infinity Gauntlet, War, and Crusade, too.
Nice.
Why not?
Nice.
Outstanding. All right, so, again, I've talked about this, depending on your perspective, ad nauseum, ad infinitum on the air many times. the Black Panther run by Christopher Priest, and he's working with artists. The primary artist working with Sal Velluto and Bob Almond, but also who else is in there? Mark Texiera does the early issues.
Jim Calafiore had a fill in.
Jim Calafiore, Mike Manley. But it's primarily Velluto. Also, Mark Bright is his partner from Quantum Woody does some issues. But the core of it is Velluto and Almond, and I collect original art from that series. I'm looking at some of it right now on my wall. But again, I've always loved the Black Panther character when I was a kid, but this book made me realize what a tremendous writer Christopher Priest is, because he doesn't just take the Black Panther and realize the full potential of that character as he was originally conceived by Lee and Kirby and Don McGregor, and then takes it to a whole nother level. He also realized in some ways the full potential of the Marvel Universe, of the awesome historical tapestry of that universe, in that everything that goes on in that series is rooted in the history of the Marvel Universe. I mean, when you read the whole series, you realize what an awesome achievement it really is. I mean, the Black Panther movie that everybody's raving about, and as they should, I adore it. That movie doesn't even exist without what Priest did, and also what Don McGregor did. It doesn't even happen. And if you're a lover of Marvel, as I am, and the history of Marvel, I can't think of a series more satisfying than his run on Black Panther. I mean, from issue to issue, you can go back to the series again and again. There's so many loving details, both with the Panther's history and the wider Marvel universe, and he makes everything work. And we've talked many times in there about how a great writer can take on a character and all the character's history and acknowledge all of it, and then still do something new without diluting or just abolishing all that came before. Weaker writers will do that, Reginald Hudlin, but great writers, they can make it all work. And Priest takes all the great elements of Black Panther, and he says, you know what? This guy's not a superhero, he's a king. And that's how I'm going to approach this going forward. And the world of Wakanda, Killmonger, Monica Lynn, of course, the wonderful creation of Everett K. Ross. As much as I love Shane, who's the actor who plays in the movie, I just blank.
Yeah,
Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman,
who's a wonderful actor, but that's not Everett K. Ross. That's just a narrative device for these films. But for me, it's one of the great finite Marvel series, one of the great finite series in comics. They did an annual a year or so ago where they brought back Black Panther writers McGregor, Priest, Hudlin, and the Priest story was so satisfying because once again he incorporated in the current continuity of Black Panther that Ta-Nehisi Coates is doing, but it was still very much the Christopher Priest voice of Black Panther and Everett K. Ross. So again, go out. It's available in softcover trades. It's another master class in just the comic book form, especially in the context of the Marvel Universe. So that's my number 2.
I'm glad you mentioned that what makes a writer great is being able to build upon what came before and not forgetting it. And that's something that again, Kurt Busiek did so well in Avengers Forever, and that's what I appreciated. And that's come on, working with Immortus and Kang and their convoluted stories and making that work. And Chris Priest did the exact same thing. I mean, not throwing out the Kirby stuff. I mean, come on.
No, he incorporated it.
Yeah,
he actually, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, he explained that and made it work in the overall history. It was an amazing feat.
Oh,
I'm working my way through that run as we speak, Chris. I'm in the mid-30s right now.
Wow.
And there was one particular throwaway appearance of the Panther in an issue of Daredevil a bunch of years ago, in which it was revealed that the Panther had a cousin who happened to be married to an American pilot who was a chronic drinker and gambler, and Panther and Daredevil had to confront this man's dissolute lifestyle for his cousin's sake in that story. Priest even found a way to work her and her dysfunctional little family unit in passing, into one of the stories that he was writing. His time as a Harlem school teacher like his prize student from one of those old stories in the 70s. She was working there as well. So, yes, the priest is absolutely a skillful weaver, and he allows no skein of continuity to go to waste. And I value this series, Chris, as much as you do for that reason. I'm really enjoying it right now.
Heard, I envy your journey. Bravo, sir. All right, Ian, you're number 2.
All right, so my number 2, I waffled on it, and then I decided to jump on it just because even if it is as new as it is, and it's definitely the newest thing on my list, I'm going to reread Vision, and I'm going to reread it a lot. Vision, the complete series, the hardcover that they put out, that collects the entire series, was, I mean, that's one of the crown jewels on my shelf right now, with some fantastic art by Gabriel Walta and Michael Walsh and Mike Del Mundo and all the other people involved with it, and Tom King's story crafting is superb because it's almost a horror story at times. Because this is a character that was always, I guess the best way to describe him would be aloof, where he had trouble connecting with those around him because he himself was an android, so he felt like he was human, but at the same time was not. And even when he was, in a relationship with Scarlet Witch, there was love, but it was also unease because you're like, is this person real? Is he not real? It's creepy. Wait, they have kids now. What the hell just happened? Yeah, that was still weird. But it gave us Young Avengers, so I can't say that that's all bad. But here with Vision, you see Vision try to create a family for himself, try to create a life for himself. He gets a daughter, and he gets a wife, and he gets a dog. Oh my God, that dog! Hey, it's a happy family. Everything's great until you realize how he got the wife, and how he got the dog, and how he got the daughter, and how his wife's brain patterns are based on the Scarlet Witch, and that's always a great idea because Scarlet Witch is absolutely sane. That's it's not the best idea in the world, but of course he would base his his synthetic wife off of the woman that he once loved. That does make perfect sense. Yeah. The story that goes on and the twists and turns in this easily make it the best Marvel comic of the last 20 years, in my honest opinion.
I couldn't agree. It's way up there.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
way up there.
And it's one I'm not going to tire of. I can, I've told friends about it. I've told, I've told family about it, and I gladly have rebought this thing 4 times. I bought it in issues. I have digital copies from when there was a digital sale, and I have the hardcover on my shelf. And that hardcover is coming with me to a deserted island. There's no question about it. I don't care if the dust cover gets a little dusty. But I'm gonna enjoy that, and it's one of those series that stays with you after you're done with it, and there's still so many small things happening in that, and characters that I didn't expect to see show up again. I'm blanking on his name now. The synthoid from the Runaways.
Victor or somebody?
Thank you, Victor. Yes. Victor showing up as essentially Vision's quote unquote cousin was very unexpected, or brother if you want, since they both come from Ultron. And most importantly, this series does not try to do what Kurt Busiek did with trying to straighten out the origin, because that wasn't the point of the series. So I'm glad he didn't touch on that, because we don't need to know where the Vision came from. We need to know where he is. And the only real flashbacks we see are from his relationship with Scarlet Witch, and I'm okay with that. But overall, this is a series that needs to be read, needs to be reread, and reread, and reread until I run out of water.
Well, it's so when years pass and a passing merchant ship finds the skeleton of Ian Levinstein, the bony hand will be clutching that copy of Vision miniseries.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll maybe I'll write in the sand. Vision was here, so that they.
Well, Ian, it's a great. I mean, it's one of the most innovative superhero comics of recent years.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Shane,
All right.
go ahead.
My big cheat. So there's almost no way that I can separate all of those titles for all the history that they all share, for all the crossovers with the JSA, both in the golden age, the silver age, and in modern days, for the lineage that went through All-Star Squadron, Infinity Inc., JSA, the modern day JSA, helping to train the new generation of heroes that some of them go through the JLA, and it's just massive. And that's my favorite thing about pretty much any team book, but especially DC's Justice League, Justice Society, and related titles, is the lineage that they share, the history that they share. More heroes for your buck. You can, like Adam said, you might as well say almost the whole DC universe, because everybody's been part of one of those teams in some way. It's always my go-to favorite read for any superhero book. I'm slowly dwindling down my list as I don't want to say lose interest. That's not it. It's that I'd rather spend less money on things coming out because I have so many things from the past that I have yet to read. That all of these titles together just seem the perfect setting to have on a desert island that you can't get off of. There's plenty there to read. It's thousands of issues, and it will be there for anybody to read who's trapped there with me. I just recently, I'm trying to read certain things that I've never read before, in that I have trades of them. I finished, like I said, Dark Knight Master Race a few months ago. I finished New Teen Titans Volume 1, which I've never read, so I have those. I just started this week reading the first volume of Justice League of America Archives.
Wow.
And I've never read the Brave and the Bold issues. I've never read those early issues. So in my head, normally, I hear Batman talk like Kevin Conroy, because that's a great voice to hear Batman speak in your head. However, opening this book, going to page 1, all I hear are the classic Super Friends cartoon character voices and Ted Knight narrating the whole thing.
Aquaman!
I hear that. That's how I read it. I hear the music in the background playing. It's such a surreal experience that I've had reading the first Brave and the Bold issues, and these are the voices that are coming through. It solidified what I wanted to do with one of these picks.
Meanwhile, at the Hall of Justice.
Oh, there's so much narration that I hear Ted Knight on almost every panel. It's incredible.
Shane, well done.
Your pick of everything was a good one.
It's totally pitiful. I know that.
Not at all, my friend. In fact, I completely understand why you're feeling drawn more to older stuff than newer, because there's so much you want to read or re-experience. So it makes perfect sense.
Besides which, it's your topic and your rules, so bend them any way you want.
Hell yeah. All right, Mert, you're number 2.
All right, let's go cosmic here for a little bit. So you have Infinity Gauntlet, Infinity War, and sure, Infinity Crusade. I mean, this is the stuff that got me into comics in the first place back in the early 90s. I have revisited these stories from time to time. They don't hold up super well, but they hold up fairly well, at least. You've got some Perez artwork in there. You've got a lot of Ron Lim artwork in there, which is just fine with me. And you've got Thanos the Mad Titan, and you've got Omnipotence galore, those 6 magical glittering trinkets that have captured the imagination of the world now, thanks to their appearance on the big screen, which will always be gems and not stones to me, as we all know.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a comic that I can reread over and over again. And besides which, these sort of adolescent fantasies of absolute universal power will make a nice counterpoint to my reality of powerlessness as I'm trapped on this desert island for extended periods of time. So it's just a nice little flight for my imagination to take, just to keep my hopes up. Yep. So it's kind of one of my favorite works of all time, and it would have been number one on my alternates list, but thanks to Shane, I can cut and paste it and just stick it in here. It's all right, Shane. It's once again, this is your topic. You can just screw me over any way you want.
Well, Maroon, let's listen to you wax rhapsodic about Infinity War at any time. Outstanding. All right, gentlemen, should we proceed to our number ones?
Sounds good.
All right, Ian, fire away.
All right, my number one, and I was waffling on this, and it wasn't even written down, but I have to follow my heart and say Young Justice.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Of course.
Oh, it's a great pick, man. Shane.
Starman.
Boom.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, it's predictable that way.
Yeah, it's one of my alternates. Murd?
Whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow?
Oh,
Epic.
One of my top alternates. Well done.
And my number one is Daredevil Born Again.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're right. Black Panther being number two does suddenly seem less surprising.
All right, Ian, wax rhapsodic, my friend.
All right. Pretty much anybody who's ever heard me on a podcast knows that I like Young Justice, and it does not surprise me at all that I had to go there. It's like I was thinking, I have all these other things on my list, but this is what just brings me joy. Peter David writes kid heroes better than anybody else.
Absolutely,
he really does, and he did so throughout the 90s. Like it was old hat, and he brought so much life into the characters of Impulse and Superboy and Wonder Girl and Tim Drake Robin and Secret, and whenever Spoiler would show up, she'd be around, and there was not Huntress, but Empress. Thank you, Empress.
Yeah, Empress.
Empress was a great character. Little Lobo. When he showed up,
Slobo.
Yes, Slobo. The car that they got from
the Forever People.
From the Forever People. Yep, and so many other characters that were thrown in there along the way, just crafted this overall story. And Young Justice, I think when it premiered, nobody really expected it to last as long as it did, just because it seemed like it was Teen Titans light. That's what I thought when I first saw it on the stands. I'm like, I don't really need it. And I was first getting into comics at the time, but I'd heard of the Teen Titans. I'd never heard of Young Justice. I'm like, what the hell is this? And it was the Teen Titans of the 90s. Like they tried to do Teen Titans books and they tried to do Titans books, but this is the one that worked. And this is the one where characters grew and evolved and did things that they never would have expected to. This is the one where you got Jan and Jaina to show up at one point.
Yep.
Yeah.
The Wonder Twins, they didn't speak English. That was their big thing. Like they were aliens and it couldn't be understood by anybody, which was a nice fun twist. Red Tornado as their mentor was an excellent choice.
Yes, he was. Yep.
And it's a character that I feel is severely lacking in present day, DC. He needs to be around
Absolutely.
more. I love him as a character. And Todd Nauck's art was so full of spirit and joy and just youthful exuberance. And so much of... I was so happy to see that so much of this Young Justice run made it into the Young Justice animated series in ways that I was not expecting it to.
Yep.
And Arrowette was a character that was introduced here that they essentially used in a different way on Young Justice with a different name. Just overall, it's just one of those series that got me into DC. It was my foot in the door, and I'm so very happy that it was. Todd DeZago started this off. Like people forget that Young Justice, the first Young Justice series, like one shot was by Todd DeZago, and then after that,
right, yeah,
Peter David.
World Without Grown-Ups, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, and then Peter David took it over from there. And then there was that one event where all of the kids were adults and all of the adults were kids, which I think was not World Without Young Justice, but it was a play on World Without
Sins of Youth. Was it
Sins of Youth? Thank you.
That's it. Okay. That's it.
Yes, Sins of Youth, and the plays on the characters that they had there with like the Young Justice characters all as adults trying to run down the baby JLA was a sight to see and made me so very happy. And when graduation day happened, it did feel like an actual graduation, like we were moving on. And Jeff Johns, wrote a pretty decent Teen Titans for a while until that series went off the rails in a lot of different ways. But not
like the television show went off the rails, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Let's not even.
That's another discussion.
Yeah, I haven't paid for the service yet, so I don't know anything about this show outside of the trailer, and I'm not. I hope to not.
Talk for another time.
Exactly. But I will say, just overall, by the time they got to that graduation day, they were at graduation day for a reason. And it was because Peter David grew them as characters. That Khan was where he was because of what happened in his solo book and because of Young Justice. Same with Impulse. Same with Tim and Cassie and the rest of the bunch. So it's a series that I will easily return to, and it made me the comic book reader that I am in a lot of ways. And trap me with it.
Wow. Ian, I wish I would have known you when that was coming out. I think out of all of my comic book friends back then that we used to hang out, I think I was the only one reading that series. It was, especially in the beginning, such a guilty pleasure because everyone else thought it was just silly or not worth even the time of day. I loved that series from day one, and I stuck with it the entire run.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Me too. And I mean, Ian, you're conjuring up a wonderful memory now for me in that whenever I would get that book when the new issue came out, I had such a smile on my face reading it because, like you said, Peter David, he just is such a master at writing the voice of younger characters like that.
Yeah.
And it was fun, and sometimes it was poignant. There was a lot of great comedy in it, a lot of great throwbacks. Murd, what's the Forever People cycle called again?
I think it's the Super Cycle.
The Super Cycle, yeah. It was that series was a gem. Like you said, nobody else was really doing anything like that. It had such a singular series for its time, and great pick, Ian. Great pick.
Thank you.
And Ian, I am on my third watch through of the Young Justice cartoon. I did get the DC streaming app, and I have 2 episodes left of Invasion, and then I'm just waiting for months for Outsiders to come.
Yeah, that's what's going to get me to get the service. Is once that series comes out, I will get it for a couple months and watch through it because I need more of that in my life, and if that's the only way I'm going to get it, then they're going to get my money.
Oh, such a great cartoon, and like you said, so many things that came out of that book got put into that cartoon in such clever and interesting ways. It was a win.
Oh yeah, and that cartoon, in many ways, because that was right when New 52 was happening. In many ways, that was my DC universe. Like, including things like Arsenal and his kid. We lost that in the New 52, and that was the animated series. It was basically like, okay, we'll throw you guys a bone and remember that Legacy still exists, and this is what the characters used to be like.
Oh, it's a fantastic series.
Definitely.
All right, Shane, you're number 1.
All right, like you with Black Panther, Chris, I have talked ad nausea about how Starman is such a fantastic series, such an affinity for that. I'm currently up into the 30 numbered issues of that series, rereading it. So much started with that series by accident, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the character, what James Robinson was writing, and what he was putting Jack Knight through, how he let Jack grow and go through life in a similar pace that what I was going. Of course, I wasn't battling villains and flying through the air, but we were going through similar things at times that I just absolutely fell in love with that book and that character. I'm sure I've said it before. I don't know how many of you actually know it. That book, I picked up an issue of it strictly to create an easy Halloween costume because of a cover I saw. It had Jack's jacket, the back of it, a clear picture so I could mimic that on the back of a black jacket I had.
I know that cover, yep.
Create the costume really easy, and boom, there I was. And after Halloween, I read the issue, started reading a couple issues here and there, and then went back and picked up everything I missed before and went all the way through it, and never regretted it, and actually felt silly for not picking it up when it started.
Well, Shane, that's one of my alternates. And that's another example of a series that in many ways is really superior to some of the stuff on my top 5. But because, it's James Robinson's masterwork. For me, that is one of, like, when you talk about great superhero series that sort of transcend some limitations of the genre, Starman is there. That's another book where he so acknowledges all the history surrounding that universe and that character, and but he makes everything fresh and new, and you so care about Jack Knight and his father and like the conversations with David once a year, and
epic.
It's a series I hope someday on the show we can really break down and go through the whole thing, because it's a masterpiece.
The things he started in the beginning of the series that came to fruition all the way through to the end, just absolutely amazing. The amount of heroes, Elongated Man, Sue Dibney, Phantom Lady, Wesley Dodds, all these characters coming in and being part of this journey with Jack, it was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
The other great thing about Starman is that it's one of those rare series, and another one of my alternates I'll mention soon is another, that it takes the Golden Age concepts and it realizes the inherent greatness and power in those concepts. Granted, we go back to a lot of the Golden Age stories, and sometimes maybe they're a little tough to get through because they're written in such a different time. But Robinson realizes at the core why those concepts so capture people's imagination in the 1930s and 40s.
Yeah,
and he just brings them into the modern era. Like, I always remember when they do the flashback of the affair that the Golden Age Starman had with the Golden Age Black Canary. And it's just one of those rare stories that just makes you realize just what comics can achieve as an artistic medium.
I'm glad you picked this, Shane, even though I knew you were going to, because you're you. But I
terribly predictable that way.
But I know that I'm glad that I went first, because Jack gave his rod to Cassie in Sins of Youth, which was a huge Young Justice event. So that's it's a nice piggyback there.
All right, Murd, you're number 1.
All right. Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. This is just about the only story in all of comics that possibly exceeds Crisis on Infinite Earths in my esteem.
Wow.
It's one of the earliest DC reading experiences I had. It's not the first Superman story I ever read. That was actually Superman number 75, the Death of story. But it was the first Superman story that showed me what I had been missing all those years of not really knowing much of anything about Superman. It's written, of course, by Alan Moore, with art by who is for me still the definitive Superman artist of all time, Kurt Swan, with inks by George Perez. So it looks fantastic, of course. Originally published in 2 single issues back in 1986, but then sometime in the mid-90s republished or reprinted in a single compact volume, perfect for schlepping along to a desert island, for example. And so I picked that up off the racks at that time in the mid-90s, and the story is kind of like a Gotterdämmerung for the heroic myth of Superman, in which Alan Moore takes as many different elements of the Superman myth that had accrued over the past several decades, all the Silver and Bronze Age conventions, all of his greatest foes, his closest friends and lovers, just all the elements that have become classically entwined into his myth, and to sort of whip them all up into this apocalyptic crescendo, culminating in a Ragnarok-style showdown in the Arctic wastes in and around the Fortress of Solitude, in which Superman's greatest villain is exposed for what he truly is. And it's a momentous occurrence there. And in the end, it's both tragic and also aspirational and hopeful for the future, in which we see Superman, the legendary Man of Steel, lose everything that he's ever had so that he's now free to gain everything he's ever wanted. And I've loved this story for a very long time, but I can see myself finding new reasons to love it if I were trapped with it on a desert island, because I too would feel a little bit like I had lost everything. And maybe reading Alan Moore's take on the twilight days of the dawn, the decline, the sunset of the myth of the Man of Steel as it had been charted through the 60s, 70s, and the first half of the 80s. I could see maybe the possibility for brighter things on my own horizon on the other side of my time on the desert island. So, yeah, this is a story that I would take with me just about any place. But, yeah, it would definitely go with me to that island as well.
Excellent.
I still wonder what his Twilight.
Go ahead, Ian, I'm sorry.
Oh no! I'm sorry. I was just going to say real quick. I still wonder what his Twilight of the Superheroes would have been like.
Oh yeah.
I have seen a treatment of that online. Where he separated all the characters of the DC universe into different feudal houses almost, and how they all kind of end up in this massive multi-sided conflict with one another. It would have been pretty involved in interesting stuff. Maybe a little bit. It might have collapsed under its own weight. Too.
Yeah.
Like I could see it like turning out like Universe X from Marvel, for example.
I may have a printed copy of that treatment somewhere in my comic collection.
It's possible.
just a written up script and synopsis of things. I just seem to remember printing it off years ago in the old house when computers were just coming into where I was getting on the internet and searching out stuff.
I'd be interested to see that.
Yeah. I'll search around for it.
Thanks, bro. Well, Murd, I mean, what can we say? I mean, no one speaks more eloquently about a story like that than you. I mean, it's easily one of the greatest comics, one of the greatest Superman stories of all time. So,
I did not realize you held it in such high regard, even above Crisis like that, Adam.
Even above Crisis, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, quite simply, like I don't have as much of an affinity for Silver Age and Golden Age comics as the rest of you guys, just because I'm not as familiar with it as I'd like to be. But reading that series, I did get a major sense of closure and understanding for what was going away. And what was being replaced with. I think it was a very an excellent coda for the character of Superman that we knew up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
All right. My number one. All right, let me tell a story first. So it's the mid '90s, and I'm in Manhattan with our good friend Ryan Feeden and my old dear friend Randy Ross, who actually started the first Wild Pig store with me. And we're going to a comic convention. I don't remember who was promoting the show. It was one that was only around briefly, maybe just that year. The lineup of guests they had was unbelievable. I got free Preacher sketches from Stephen Dillon, the late great Stephen Dillon. I got sketches from John Romita Sr., which were also free.
Yeah.
And the featured Barry Windsor Smith was there. Like, it was an amazing galaxy of creators. And the guest of honor was Frank Miller. And I got online. I remember there was a guy in front of me, a stereotypical comic book fan. He was clearly not bathing. I remember he leaned over, and the shirt pulls up, the festering crack. Randy nearly bowls over with the cheese smell exuding from this man's orifices. It was horrific, but it was just a great moment of just being in that community and sort of some of the pitfalls of that community. But anyway, that tangent aside, so I'm waiting online for Miller, and I have in my hands a trade of Daredevil Born Again I've had since I was, 12 or 13. It was printed shortly after the series ended in the monthly comic. And I brought it up to him, and he looked at me, and he held it up the whole crowd, and he said, "This is how a comic should look." Because I'd read it so many times, it was so worn. And then he said, he personalized it to me, and it was like one of the great moments for me as a fan, as a reader. And that story, and I read it at least once a year, that story for me, when I talk about myth and just the power of myth in a comic book story. So Miller takes the classic, like the deconstruction plot device, right, where a hero is just stripped of everything that sustains him or her. The friends, the self-respect, material support, everything is just gone. And he has to build himself back up from that lowest of low points. And Miller takes the Daredevil character and utterly destroys Matt Murdock. And not only that, the impact that has on the people in his life, Karen Page, Foggy Nelson, Ben Urich of the Daily Bugle. And Miller, I mean, it is one of the darkest superhero stories, certainly that Marvel has ever produced. Because you see a hero who's essentially losing his mind because of the Kingpin revealing his identity, like knowing his identity and destroying his life as a consequence of that. And then you watch this hero we thought we knew as Matt Murdock, we realize is mentally struggling, how he brings himself back from the brink literally of madness as well as just material ruin. And there are so I'm not going to, because we're going to do an episode one day on Born Again. Peter and I have pledged to do this, but there are so many moments in that story where there are tears in my eyes, where I'm getting literally body chills, because it's just one, and it's not in a hyperbolic, over-the-top way. It's the power of the struggle that Murdock is going through, and just there's so many moments that just the only words you can use to describe them are just epic. And some of them are small moments, like Ben Urich, trying to find out what's happened to Matt Murdock, what's happened to Daredevil, where has he gone, and a lot of the story is through Urich's eyes as he's pounding the pavement, trying to figure out what's going on with Murdock and the Kingpin and so forth. And it's a story that affects me like no other in my entire comic book reading life. And there's the moment near the end of it, because you've all read the story, right, guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
The moment near the end where he puts the Daredevil costume back on to confront the Kingpin and his schemes, and he's standing in flame, and he's posing and holding up the Billy Club, and Hell's Kitchen is on fire because Nuke has been unleashed. For me, it's one of the most mythic moments in all of superhero comics, because we have to remember Matt Murdock is basically just a guy who, yes, he has ninja training and he has these senses, but otherwise he's just a man who tried to fight the Submariner in issue 7, the classic Wally Wood issue. And in the story, there's a key moment where he's been basically physically destroyed, and he crawls to his father's gym, and he starts to hit the bag, and he basically just says, "Never give up. Never give up." And then he collapses. And then, of course, Miller introduces the concept of his mother, who we always thought was dead all these years, and she reemerges. And I remember when she brings him into the mission, and he's dying of fever, basically, and she's praying and saying, God, you have to restore him, because he's going to be your hand of light in this city. And it's even now I'm getting choked up, because Miller takes a character that we all love and has been around since the 60s, but he realizes the full potential of that character. And the other thing he does in Born Again that's so important, he reveals and explains and sort of explores the true horror of Wilson Fisk, and how he is one of the most malevolent figures in the Marvel Universe. He's not a super-powered being. He is this deeply malevolent master planner, and one of the most viciously brutal villains in the Marvel Universe. And when he describes him as the Lord of Crime, and how he sits in his web and he manipulates generals and politicians, and he murders his subordinates, if they mention his wife or they challenge him, and how he becomes obsessed with trying to destroy Matt Murdock because he sees Murdock as this good person he has to tear down. And then, of course, how Miller, for me, takes on the definitive take on Captain America. When Captain America says, I'm not loyal to anything but the dream, and how, he becomes involved in the story. And right now I'm watching Daredevil Season 3. I'm not going to spoil it. All I'm going to say is it is easily one of the best Netflix series Marvel has done yet, because they've taken the Born Again story, the spirit of it, and they've brought it into the continuity of the Daredevil show. And when the source material is that strong, you have one of the best Marvel shows yet, hands down. And all I'll say is I'm halfway through it. It is phenomenal. And anybody who loves Daredevil and has read Born Again, please watch Season 3 of the Netflix series. So
Wow.
that's my short take on Born Again. We'll have an episode where I can talk about this for hours. But that's my number one.
Well, if you somehow make a compilation of each time that Born Again or Frank Miller has been mentioned on a podcast by Chris Eberly, you would have at least like a 7-hour podcast. So that's
very, very true. I mean, it's funny as you go back through my reading life. Miller is my creator. I mean, most of the comics that affect me the most, he had a hand in.
Yeah.
So,
and he does street level so well. That's just something that you can easily say about him is that the characters that fight below and look above, he probably does the best.
Yeah, because he brings that noir sensibility, and like Born Again, so much of it is narrated by Ben Urich.
Yeah,
and he's that city reporter, and the Netflix series right now, it is truly phenomenal. And it would not exist without Frank Miller's work. And we also should mention David Mazzucchelli, who also drew Year One, another artist who I revere. And his artwork on Born Again, it is beyond breathtaking. So, gentlemen, I'm sure we all have alternates.
Yeah,
we do.
Well, we'll have to do our lightning round. Ian, you can start, sir.
All right, great. So Incognito by Ed Brubaker.
Oh, it's so good.
Yep. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that for a while, and then I was thinking about my Desert Island books, and Incognito is easily it's a great combination of superhero and noir, and that's something I highly appreciate about the way that he did that, and obviously anything with Sean Phillips included as well is going to be damn good. Absolute DC: The New Frontier by Darwin Cook.
Oh, God.
And it's another one of the books that, like Murd mentioned previous, could whack a few animals over the head. So that's multi-use right there. All-Star Superman and Multiversity are by Grant Morrison.
All-Star Superman is one of my alternates. That's wonderful.
Yep. I've got the Dark Phoenix saga, like I mentioned earlier, and a manga called I Am a Hero, which is easily one of my favorite takes on the zombie genre. Out there, that anybody who wants something unique and wonders what zombies in Japan would be like, a society that doesn't really have guns that much, what it would be like for the one person who has a gun and is not quite right in the head. It's very, very interesting. So I'd highly recommend that. Gerard Way's Umbrella Academy. I would put that on the list as well. Alison Bechdel's Fun Home.
Very good.
Yep. Yeah, and How to Understand Israel in 60 Days or Less by Sarah Gilden. I put on the list as well.
Ooh, I have that. I haven't read it yet.
It's very, very good. It's what, actually, I'll say it's good. I have problems with it, and it's more the way that she herself is in the story. But it doesn't say anything negative about the story itself, if that makes sense. You'll see, hopefully you'll see more what I mean when you actually read it.
Sure.
JSA: The Golden Age by James Robinson.
Oh, so good.
That's on mine too.
Yep. And Mark Waid's Flash Run certainly has to be mentioned here. And I'd say Dan Slott's Spider-Man. It's one of those ones as well that I just have fun reading.
That's a great achievement by Dan Slott.
God. No question, absolutely no question. I certainly have hundreds and hundreds of issues that I can wind up reading on a desert island. So that's what I got off the top of my head.
All right, Murd. I'm sorry, Shane. Shane's next. I apologize.
All right, for complete runs that I cheat, it's the run of Birds of Prey, a good run of Batman that I read, which really would encompass 400 to current day. Nightwing, Tim Drake's Robin run, his Red Robin run, a bunch of Star Wars titles, Amazing Spider-Man from when I was growing up, from like 286 through 320 some, Bone by Jeff Smith.
Oh,
nice.
Neil Gaiman's Sandman.
Yeah, of course.
Avengers from after Heroes Reborn, because that's when I really started reading Avengers all the way through, Jeff Johns' run of it, I think. The X-Men run that I mentioned before. Let's see. Green Lantern Sinestro Corps War, all the entire event. I thought that was even years after realizing that really I was reading DC's version of Marvel Zombies, kind of freaked me out, but that was a great run. Jeff Johns' Flash run, the Golden Age, a good run of Transformers comics from the Marvel Age, Mask. This is the only thing I have one single issue of. I believe it was Kevin Smith's Daredevil run. It was an issue where Matt Murdock finds a letter, reads it. I forget why he read the letter. It's from Karen. And yeah. I absolutely lost it reading that issue.
That's a great issue. That's an excellent issue.
That's the only single issue I have. I have special editions like my FF Byrne Omnibus that we had talked about on the show. Yeah. New Frontier, my absolute editions of Batman, Long Halloween, Dark Victory, Hush, Danger Girl, JLA Avengers, my volumes of Black Sod, and my complete editions of G.I. Joe. I have the first 4 or 5 volumes of it.
Nice.
Murd?
All right. Just a few here from me. Well, for much the same reasons as we talked about JLA Avengers and Avengers Forever, for the footnote factor, I would put in top 10 from Alan Moore's America's Best Comics.
Excellent.
Good choice.
Superhero cop show set in a world where everyone is a superhero. It's just jam-packed with all kinds of little sly site references and Easter eggs pertaining to other superhero comics and works of pop culture. You could just spend hours just picking through it, identifying who is this little figure in the background.
That's a great choice. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I swear up and down we need to do a footnotes series of episodes on that someday. But meanwhile, I'll enjoy it on the desert island. Couple of my favorites I just threw in here. All-Star Squadron, for example. I could just borrow the copy that he's floating in on. Secret Origins, another good one from the 80s vault. Also, the Claremont and Davis Excalibur run, in particular the Cross Time Caper, which is a interdimensional romp. I echo Shane that there needs to be some Sandman in here. I probably restrict myself to just the first volume, though, Preludes and Nocturnes. Just doing a little monkey see, monkey do on Ian here. I'm going to throw in The Golden Age by James Robinson, one that I hadn't thought of, but I wish I had. Thinking of things that might evoke colder climates, to help fuel my frosty fantasies while I'm sweltering to death on this desert island. Maybe Chuck Dixon's Winter World, the original series from Eclipse, or its decades-distant sequel from IDW. Which is kind of an apocalyptic tale of survival in a second ice age. And maybe one of those collections of Christmas comics, those Christmas treasuries that IDW and Yo Books have been putting out lately. I might want one of those along. Help me think cool thoughts. And last but not that collection that IDW put out not too long ago of Eric Shanower's Oz graphic novels from the 80s. Adventures in Oz. I mentioned the Oz Wonderland War earlier, but this is still, to me, the emerald standard in Oz comic books. I'd like to have that along. Okay, and now, last thing I'll mention, some collection or other of Milton Caniff's Terry and the Pirates.
Oh, wow.
I would love that on a desert island. I've never even read Terry and the Pirates, about which I know almost nothing, except that dozens of elite comic creators have held it up as not only a personal inspiration, but just the epitome of how to tell solid adventure stories in the comics medium. So its reputation precedes it. And, also the fact that it's probably the greatest work ever produced in comics in the subgenre of South Seas adventures. And since I'll be more or less involuntarily embroiled in a South Seas adventure of my own, stuck on this friggin' desert island, I might as well lean into that and read a comic about that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Murd, again, a CGS Medal of Valor to you for taking this theme all the way home. Man.
Yeah, wow.
Incredible.
All right, taking what shape.
My alternates are expensive. I'm just going to rip through them. I'll maybe comment just a couple, but there's a lot. So
let's hear this excruciating deliciousness from you.
Indeed. So we've got New Teen Titans, The Judas Contract,
Nice.
Ian, I think you'll appreciate this one. Avengers: The Children's Crusade.
Ooh, good one. Yes.
Yep. As you mentioned, All-Star Superman. As Shane mentioned, Strangers in Paradise. We mentioned Bone. We mentioned Starman, of course. Let me do one of my favorite writers, my Garth Ennis set here. So we've got Preacher. One of his most underrated and greatest series, Hitman. Punisher: Born. We talked about Enemy Ace, War in Heaven. Those are all sort of my and also his Nick Fury stories, which are phenomenal, where he kind of puts what if Nick Fury actually existed, and the only other person who existed in that world from the Marvel Universe is Frank Castle. Those are classics. Shane, I think you'll appreciate this pick, Gotham Central.
Oh, excellent.
Right on.
J. Michael Straczynski's run on Thor, which I think is just one of the greatest periods for that
epic.
character ever. A series I referenced before that naming, Sandman Mystery Theater. Which, if you're going to talk about realizing the inherent greatest in a golden age concept and bringing it into like the sordid real world of the 1930s and 40s, to me, this is one of the greatest finite DC series ever conceived. That's by Matt Wagner, Steven Siegel, and Guy Davis. That's one of my top alternates, really. Let me give some love to one of my favorite writers, Brian K. Vaughan, the classic Ex Machina, and of course, Why the Last Man. Shane, you'll appreciate G.I. Joe issues 1 through 50 by Larry Hama.
Absolutely.
And various artists. All of Frank Miller's other Daredevil work. So Man Without Fear, and of course his original run on Daredevil in the 1970s, 1980s. For Sandman, I picked Brief Lives, which is my favorite arc out of that legendary series. Ian mentioned before one of my favorite creative teams right now, which is the dream team of Brubaker, Phillips, and Breitweiser. My pick is The Fade Out, which is their masterful take on Hollywood noir in the post-World War II era. The Immortal Iron Fist by Brubaker, Aja, and Fraction. For me, that's probably one of the greatest Iron Fist arcs of all time. Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's Marvels, of course. Also Kurt Busiek's and Pat Olive's Untold Tales of Spider-Man.
Nice.
Which I think is one of the greatest Spider-Man titles ever conceived. Let's stick on the Spidey theme here for a moment. Roger Stern's classic 1980s run of Amazing Spider-Man, primarily with John Romita Jr., where the Hobgoblin is introduced. Ed Brubaker's legendary run on Captain America. For me, one of the greatest arcs in that character's history.
Definitely.
Also, the brief Roger Stern and John Byrne cap run from the early 1980s, including the classic Baron Blood stories. My Alan Moore pick is V for Vendetta. Avengers, I picked Under Siege when the Masters of Evil take over the mansion. Probably my favorite Avengers story of all time. Poor Jarvis. Also, the Busiek Perez Ultron Unlimited, where Ultron basically wipes out an entire nation. They realize the true terror of that character and that story.
I have no idea why that was out of print when the Ultron movie came out. By the way, that really annoyed me.
Oh, you're right about that. Yeah, that is bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah.
Murd, you'll appreciate this. Prez Smells Like Teen Spirit or Teen President. Classic one-shot by Brubaker. This is a favorite Brian Wood story of mine, Northlanders, the Icelandic trilogy, which is just his masterful take on the saga of Viking families vying for power in Iceland. It's tremendous. Also, and Shane will preach this, also from Brian Wood. Remember that last Star Wars series Dark Horse did?
Oh,
where
yes.
Brian Wood did a whole series of tales with the original characters. Still some of the best Star Wars comics I've ever read in my life.
Yep.
I highly recommend those. That's another one. You have to have the culmination of the Lee Kirby FF collaboration, FF issues 44 through 60. It's the Inhumans, it's Galactus, it's the Black Panther, it's Doctor Doom, it's the Surfer, it's This Man, This Monster. It's the pinnacle of Silver Age Marvel Comics. Speaking of the Silver Surfer, and this one's for you, Pansy, the Dan Slott, Mike Allred Silver Surfer run, also I think one of the greatest Marvel comics of recent years. The classic Starlin Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel, which I still think is one of Starlin's greatest achievements as a comic book creator. Another very important Spider-Man story for me is The Return of the Green Goblin, issues 44 through 47 from the Peter Parker series. I think the definitive take on the Parker-Norman Osborn rivalry and how twisted it really is and how twisted Norman Osborn is. I usually don't like Humberto Ramos's art, but he draws a terrifying Green Goblin. And a few more. Of course, Don McGregor's Jungle Action Run, which is one of the key foundations of the Black Panther character. The original Alias by Bendis and Gaydos, the Jessica Jones, the original story. Another one of the great finite Marvel series for me. I have to mention Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu, the entire series. If I'm going to do like top 5 Marvel series, that's going to be in there without question. We talked about that in our Spotlight episode some years ago. This one's for Jamie D. The Iron Fist by Claremont and Byrne, which went into Marvel Team Up, and then Power Man and Iron Fist. Fantastic late Bronze Age. A lot of what makes Iron Fist great is established in those stories. And let's see, last but not least – oh, wait, no, there's 2 more. Sorry. Fantastic Four versus the X-Men, which is a great 80s miniseries by Chris Claremont and John Bogdanov. It's one of the all-time great takes on the Doctor Doom character. And finally, what I have on here, and there's probably more I could think of if time wasn't an issue, is Sleeper by again by Brubaker and Phillips, which is a wonderful combination of crime noir and Wildstorm characters. And it's where I was first, besides that, and then also the great Scene of the Crime one-shot by Brubaker is really exposed to that team. So, those are my alternates on the cuff.
I need to add before I forget Jonathan Hickman's Fantastic Four run.
It's great.
Oh, that's a good one, yeah.
And Brian Michael Bendis' Ultimate Spider-Man.
Oh, wow. Absolutely.
Yep.
Gentlemen, that was magnificent. Shane, terrific topic.
Fantastic run.
Yep.
Good times.
Kudos.
Anything you want to add, gentlemen, or we shot our bolt this evening?
All I will add is I recently read issue 7 and 8 of the current Justice League book, and one page my mouth dropped in issue 7 because I could not believe something they're bringing in. And I don't want to spoil it, but wow, I'm really curious to see where they go.
All right, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
very cool. And
you'll know as soon as you flip a page, you'll know.
I just wanted to add as well that I did read the first 2 issues of Jamal Eigel's The Wrong Earth, and I just needed to comment that anybody who loves old school, comic book goodness and is a fan of both Silver Age and present day comics, you will love The Wrong Earth. Give it.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
I have them. I have them on my pile.
Yep.
What would happen if Adam West Batman and Frank Miller Batman somehow switched realities?
Yep.
How would they? That's pretty much the concept.
Wow.
Tom Payer is writing it, so I second Ian. It is excellent.
Good. It's very good stuff.
Well, Ian, again, this episode will not happen without your technical skills. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Ian.
My pleasure, and happy to finally be on an episode with Shane. It's been a while.
Woo! Yeah, it's been way too long.
Well, thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing from you again because, Ian, it's just damn fun to have you on.
Good to be.
It certainly is.
Good to be here, and it's a lot less work to be the guest rather than the host.
Shane, are you ready to take us out?
Yep. Visit us at comicgeekspeak.com to send us an email. The address is comicgeekspeak@gmail.com. To leave a voicemail, the number is 267-702-6642. Stop by thecomicforums.vanilla forums. I don't know the rest of it. I didn't update that part yet.
It's the comicforums.vanillacommunity.com.
Thank you. Follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. Thanks to everyone who contributes to the episodes and listen to us bend the rules whenever we please. And as always, we are uniting the world's mightiest heroes one listener at a time.
Hey. No more of that. All right, there we go.